we've got Markus Lampinen coming on, and he will be talking to us about algorithms, data sovereignty, and NFTs for households. So, Markus, why don't you come on? And do you have a presentation, or do you want to just have a conversation here?
I do have a presentation, so visual aids, especially on a Friday afternoon, I find that those help a little bit.
Awesome. Well, listen, I'm going to let you take us away, and I'll join you. Come back on screen in about 10 minutes, and so just take it away.
Sounds great. So thank you so much for that, Ken. I found that Mike's presentation talking about the future of gaming was really, really fascinating, and especially this concept of it becoming more of a choice in terms of how we want our own behavior to evolve, if you will. So my name is Markus Lampinen. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of Prifina. And at Prifina, we're building a personal data engine that allows each one of us to extract more value ourselves from our data and building an entire ecosystem around that. And on this Friday afternoon here in San Francisco, and obviously wherever you guys are as well, then I really appreciate you guys spending a few minutes with me and talking about algorithms, data sovereignty, and then NFTs for households and household staff. So let me come back to that in just a second and kind of start it off with this very, very simple proposition that we see that in the future, in the near future, we'll all have our own household staff. But it will be slightly different. It will be, call it a reimagining of the household staff, where each of us, we have our own personal doctors, we have our therapists, we have our nutrition coaches, our sleep coaches, our meditation experts, so on and so forth, those that curate what we read and, the entire shebang. But one of the questions, especially when we're talking about the NFTs and Web3 and, 10 years from now is how? How is this actually going to look? So let's sit back a little bit more. If we look at what's going on with Web3 and what's going on with the internet's development, we see this entire explosion of data. And this is something that we all know. We have so much more data than we've had in the past. We have all of these smart rings, sensors, wearables, all of the accounts that we use, all the apps. And at the same time, that data can be harnessed if it is utilized in the right type of way. It can be harnessed to power best-in-class services across a number of different verticals. But also, it can be used to power those services in different mediums, such as virtual reality, AR, the metaverse, but also different types of headless applications, more individualized AI, and so on and so forth. We see that this data, as it becomes more individually centered with the metaverse and with the kind of the Web3 paradigm of individuals owning their data themselves, then we get a trinity of consumers, developers, and businesses that essentially exist to utilize this data in a new way. And our proposition at Prifina is that it's actually us ourselves that own this data and reap the benefits of this data. Companies and app developers, they can get easy access to utilize this data in different types of applications, but those applications will be decentralized in a way that the actual utilization of data happens, so to speak, on our side as individuals. And businesses, they can step into the future by offering a competing edge as it comes to data sovereignty and this respect for the end user and the individual, that they truly get a benefit from their own information, their own data. And the model that we're at Prifina developing is very much this notion of the individual has their data in their personal data cloud, and then we have an entire application layer that's built on top of this. But let's go back to the personal AIs and then the household staff. Let's take the example of an AI knee doctor. So this is a very, very simple algorithm that you have that looks at your walking data. It compares your stride length, your cadence, your ankles tilt, the degree of how you step. Do you step on your toes? Do you step on your heel? And then it establishes a baseline. And looking after this data for a period of time, a baseline for you. But then it also compares the data from different types of sources that you've got. So for example, your Amazon shopping behavior, and it can find when you've actually switched shoes. Very simple, right? So this is an AI application that actually exists. And when it notices a deviation from your baseline, it can suggest an action. So for example, Markus, we know that you bought a shoe 2 weeks ago, and right by now it should have been broken in, but you're still spending more weight and time on your right foot as opposed to your left foot. Maybe these shoes aren't for you, for example. Very, very simple thing. Let's take that and multiply that by 1 million. And that's really what we're talking about. These types of algorithmic household staff applications, if you will, personal AIs, these really is what the future of the internet and personalized services should look like, at least as it stands for me. So let's kind of step back into the household staff as an example. So when we're talking about this, it is really about having your own household staff of personal algorithms. So it's really about having these types of snippets of software that are built on your data that only you have access and control over, but then that data ends up powering these algorithms. And what happens then is agency through this data. So now that data and that individualized applications, which by the way, you own both of, given it's a decentralized, individualized application, it actually ends up representing you. It's looking after your own need. It's not looking after big pharma's interest. It's looking after your own. If you start thinking about how many of applications like this you can have, I mean, it's not just 1 million, it's an entirely new market. Another one would be your AI scientist that looks at your data and it monitors what type of innovation it can create on top of that. So for example, in that AI knee doctor example, maybe you find a different way of breaking in a shoe. Maybe you find in that, in some shoes, a heel strike is better than opposed to striking it with your toes first when you're running. I don't know. But the point is that if you have these algorithms running on top of your data, these algorithms end up not only working for you, but they end up inventing things for you. And this is a really interesting concept for NFTs, as well as different types of token models. What if your own algorithms end up creating proprietary IP based on your data, under your supervision, and powered by your data, under your control? That becomes effectively a new class of household IP. Take that even one step further. This IP is, of course, it would be owned by you. So who's going to be monetizing this? That can also be you. Or even stop one step further, it could actually be that algorithm. So what if your algorithm can essentially create a great way of preventing knee injuries, for example, or then, sleeping better or de-stressing, whatever it is. What if that would license that model that it developed to other algorithms? Maybe it sells some type of new product. Maybe it volunteers a new path, for example, that you've taken on your hiking route that others could benefit from. This type of an ecosystem approach to trading different types of IP based on data could be a fascinating avenue to monetize in the future. But it is also something that has to end up starting from the individual. That's what we see at Prifina, that if we can look at really delivering one of these biggest promises of Web3, that data starts with the individual and data sits on our side, then we can start crafting this ecosystem from the individual outwards, and we can really open up this new market where you have new types of individualized applications, we have new types of individualized uses. And I think going back to what Mike was talking about the future of the gaming industry, broadly, I think that the future of the internet is a choice. That in a way, we have the Web3 model that you share your data with every single app developer and you kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best outcome. And that's brought us to this stage where we are. But if we want that AI staff and we want a reimagined new set of algorithms that actually work on our interest, that doesn't cut it. We don't get there by essentially utilizing the open frameworks. And that's where I see that the future of the internet is definitely a choice of how we build applications. And then for monetizing different types of derivative IP, as well as the ecosystem interactions, we have to do that based on real value. And if you start with the individual and their own interest, then we've proven with different things like telehealth, sleep optimization, whatnot, that value is there. People already utilize those. And if they can essentially utilize products and then drive more value for others as well in the interactions, that's where we get a really interesting economic growth for the future. So that's it from my side. This is, a very comprehensive snippet for a Friday afternoon. But at the same time, I'm definitely very happy to be here. And here's my email. If anybody's got any discussions, any topics that you want to follow up on, then absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for us is we've got a community over 20,000 developers and data scientists and whatnot building on this concept. So one thing that I always like to challenge people on is if you've got a fantastic idea for a household bot, an AI algorithm, a headless app, whatever that you could actually build on individualized data, let me know. Those are things that we always want to support. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Markus. Really appreciate it. If you can stick around and put your contact information and where to follow you in the comments section. And if people have any questions, they can ask you there. So really appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Awesome.